Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 131 of the Hammer Territory podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you on a Thursday. Happy New Year, everyone. Our first episode of 2025. And I'm joined tonight by the great Stephen Tolbert. Hello, sir. How are you?
Bradley, what's up, buddy? It's been a minute since you and I have done one of these. But yeah, Happy New Year to you. Obviously, Happy New Year to everybody out there listening. Obviously it's still been pretty quiet in Braves country as we do another one of these with not a thing or nothing in terms of an addition to talk about. We do have a couple little things to get to tonight, but yeah, man, it's always good to do these with you.
You as well, my friend. Pinch hitting of sorts. Sean has been dealing with family illness for several days now, so hopefully it's coming around the bend now. Shouts to our guy Sean, living the dream. I don't have children, so I get sick less than everybody else seems to. That's what happens on the podcast. But we should say at the top of the show, we are part of Foul Territory as a network. Please check out the entire network, including the flagship show. We cover the Braves here at Hammer Territory. Please subscribe, rate, and review. Check us out on Apple, Spotify. We're on YouTube if you want to watch us on that platform. We do have 3 episodes over the holidays. Did a mailbag before the holidays started. Then Matt Olson deep dive, kind of in evergreen fashion. And then Scott and I did kind of a state of the free agent market a few days ago. And really nothing's changed since then. Like, even across the league, like this is the one time in this calendar so far, I don't know about you, Steven, where like the whole league's been pretty quiet. Like it's basically been, not that it's been totally shut down for the holidays, but as soon as Christmas Eve hit, basically it got real quiet around baseball and hasn't come out of that yet. Maybe they're waiting until Monday. Maybe offices are kind of shut down until next week, but we'll see what happens. But the Braves are quiet. Yes, we're all frustrated. Everybody says it on every podcast. It's definitely true, but it has been around baseball for the last week to 10 days, pretty quiet, I would say.
Yeah, there was that run on pitching, the Walker Buehler and a bunch of those guys kind of in that level signed. The Dodgers brought Teoscar back a couple of weeks ago. But yeah, other than that, it's been very quiet. It's just been rumors and not much else. And obviously as a Braves fan, we basically don't even get rumors. So
there's one kind of pseudo one that we'll get to in just one second, but you're right. The Braves are not a good rumor team. I wish they were for our sake, Steven. I always say this, but like, I think if I was a front office, I would operate like the Braves do, and I would not want to get anything out, and I'd operate in cloak and dagger like Alex seems to like. As a content creator, I would love some rumors. Wouldn't it be great if we just had constant rumors like some of these teams do? We did the show with copy, and it was like a gold mine all the time. It was great. I love that as a content guy, but I think Alex is better. I think Alex is better than copy in his job, so that's probably a little bit more important.
Right, one is good for baseball, and one is good for us.
Yeah,
and I agree. I mean, if I was Alex, I wouldn't tell anybody anything. Information is power. Information is leverage. Like, and the better you control it, the better you are. So I don't blame him at all for running as tight a ship as possible. There's a lot of teams out there that wish they could run as tight a ship as Alex runs.
Yep.
But yeah, for us it sucks because we're just sitting here on a fish hook, just waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting. So
it certainly does. There is one ripple. It's definitely not even a rumor. It's just like a little bit of a report that I thought was interesting in the last few days. Scott and I talked about Tanner Scott on the last show we did about a week ago, or at least a little bit less than that. Not even that. That's not really been a rumor either, but a couple of people have at least mentioned Tanner Scott. He's out there. This is similar in that vein. John Heyman of, I believe, the New York Post and Bleacher Report as well. He linked the Braves to Carlos Estevez, one of the tier 2 relievers on the market. Not Tanner Scott. He's not as good as Tanner Scott, but a real reliever, like a back end of the bullpen, good reliever. And it wasn't like the Braves are the only team on him. They just he kind of threw the Braves out there as a potential connection. If you don't know who that is, Carlos Estevez finished last year with the Phillies, actually. 32-year-old right-handed reliever. He had his best year ever last year, which probably was good timing for him. There's a question about how much you want to pay for someone's career year at 31 years old, perhaps. But Stephen, when I kind of mentioned this to you, that we kind of maybe lead with this a little bit, what did you make of this? Are you interested at all in Estevez, given that the Braves don't really have a glaring need, but I think we all agree that they're probably going to do something at the bullpen. Maybe that would be what they do.
Yeah, he's right-handed, right? He throws hard. He's a back-end reliever. The Phillies actually gave up a decent amount for him at the deadline. They gave up 2 of their top 12 prospects to get him at the deadline. So he's good. I mean, he's very good. He throws very hard. He sits 97. He touches 100, 99, 100 pretty easily. Again, he's right-handed. If you look at the Braves, best relievers at the moment, you got Iglesias, obviously, then Jimenez got hurt. And so that's kind of the big glaring hole. And then you have guys like Aaron Bummer, Dylan Lee, Grant Holmes, depending on what role he serves. Like, they could definitely use more bullpen help. I don't think there's any question about that. That's why the Tanner Scott stuff made sense.
Yep.
Obviously this would make sense. I mean, it's all going to come down to money, of course, and contract. But just on the baseball side you can't have too much bullpen up. You can't have too much pitching in general, but especially in the bullpen. And his free agent projections have been kind of all over the board in terms of what people think he's going to get. I think I saw one that was like a 330 contract, and I saw one that was like a 1-year deal for like less than 10 million. So he's got a pretty high variance in terms of what he's going to cost. So that makes it impossible. It's already impossible to predict with Alex, but it makes it even more impossible to predict because we don't know how much they have to spend, and 2, we don't know how much it costs. But just on the baseball side, it makes a ton of sense. They need high leverage relievers. I think they need another right-handed guy. He throws hard. He's had a really good year last year. It makes sense to me. It's just going to come down to money, just like everything else.
Yeah, I think we're on the same page. Like, last 3 seasons combined, he has an ERA in like the 3.3 range, FIP in the mid to high threes. Like, he's not a dominant reliever, but he's a good reliever. I'm pretty confident in saying that. Last year, ERA of 2.45, FIP of 3.2. The big change last year, we won't go super deep into him because we don't need to yet. At this time, then we'll do the deep dive. But his walk rate went way down last year, which just seems like that's what unlocked him a little bit to have his best year ever. If that's sustainable, he is a really good reliever. If it's not, then he becomes like a pretty good reliever, which is still helpful. He would still help the Braves. You mentioned the projections. The 3 that we kind of cited before the winter started were like this ESPN, I think it was Kyle McDaniel did one, Fangraphs with Ben Clemens, and then MLB Trade Rumors. Ben Clemens had the one that was 1 year, $9 million. And ESPN's was 3 for 36. Like, that's a very big range for a reliever. Now, it's similar AAV, but if you can get a guy for 1 year, $9 million, that becomes like a no risk, like absolutely yes kind of contract. Whereas 3 for 36 is a much more complete commitment to a guy that, like, it's not a crazy number. Like, I don't think the Braves giving him that contract would be outrageous. I wouldn't come on the podcast and scream and yell about it, but that's a very different contract. 1.9 and 336 are very different investments in a reliever. So we'll see. Like, that's all we have. Literally, intel wise, it's just John Heyman mentioning this on the podcast, or on a stream of some kind. So I think we're in agreement. Like, he would help. I don't know how serious it is. Nobody does. No one's reported on this that I can see locally beyond the Heyman thing. So, Alex does. I think the one thing that I will say, and I know you talked about this a little bit with Sean as well. Alex has gone out in his limited interviews he's done at the GM meetings, at the winter meetings. He's mentioned bullpen multiple times. Like, I think that he's not shying away from the fact that they want to add to the bullpen in the wake of him and his injury. So, like, that's what's got us a little bit more on high alert, at least for me. But I don't know if it's gonna be a Estevez, but like, I think they're gonna do something in the bullpen. I just don't know what it's gonna be.
Yeah, because they also lost AJ Minter, obviously, who's still a free agent out there.
Yeah,
they haven't lost him yet.
Lost so far. Yeah, he's not on the team at the moment. So,
but at the moment, he's not on the team. At the moment, they've got, in terms of healthy guys, they've got Iglesias, and their next best guy is probably Aaron Bummer, Dylan Lee, depending on what you think of Pierce Johnson.
I mean, it's those 4. I mean, it's the thing. Like, you go from last year's bullpen, which was awesome by all accounts. They had this top 6 that they were really invested in. The 4 guys we just talked about, plus Minter and Jimenez. And Minter and Jimenez were supposed to come into the season as like the number 2 and number 3 guy in the bullpen last year. And Jimenez was in that role. Minter was there until he was hurt. And they've done nothing except for lose those 2 guys right now. So the bullpen is still fine on paper. Like, there's still a good bullpen, but they're not like in the place of safety that they were. And look, both bullpens are never safe. I'm always saying that. They're not safe. But as far as like what Alex tends to do is just throw resources at the bullpen. He likes to invest in a bunch of different guys. He's not afraid to spend money, probably more so than I would say he's less afraid than I would be to spend on relievers at times. So I think this is again, I don't want to use the word rumor, but it seems like a idea that if it popped up on the timeline in the next few days, no one would be surprised if they signed Carlos Estevez. At least I wouldn't be.
Yeah, there's enough smoke between the Tanner Scott stuff and this. The Braves I think the Braves are going to add to the bullpen. I don't think it's going to be something.
Yeah.
The elephant in the room is that this is Iglesias' last year under contract, and he's the closer.
That's everything.
Yep. I would not be surprised if we got, at some point in this offseason, we got the blue square for an extension for Iglesias. I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't do that and they went out, maybe got Tanner Scott, signed him to a longer deal with the idea that he would be the guy after Iglesias. Like they could go a bunch of different ways. Estevez could be a guy who they looked at that role if they wanted to give him, some more years. So it is bullpen is always a fluctuating high variance part of the team, probably the highest variance part of the team by far. So, but yeah, as it sits today, it's a good bullpen. They could be deeper, especially right-handed wise, because after Iglesias, it gets tricky, especially if Pierce Johnson has another shaky year like he did last year. So, yeah, I think they're going to add.
Yeah, the Tanner Scott thing, and we talked about it a little bit in the last show, but one of the theories, and even in the comments and responses to that podcast that Scott and I did, it was like, well, the split between why would the Braves pay Tanner Scott big money when they have Iglesias was a lot of the explanation. And then the other half was like, well, this sets us up if Iglesias is gone. And Iglesias is going to be 35. I think his birthday is actually like today or the next day. He's pretty close to now. He'll be 35 years old. And that's not like crazy, but not a guy you would spring to mind. It's like, hey, we got to extend this guy for 2 more years as a reliever. Like it's a little bit dicey at that point in time. So I'm not saying you pay Tanner Scott big money. The Braves could do it. I wouldn't fall on the floor. But Estevez is kind of the middle ground, honestly. He's one of those guys in the middle. Like he's, I've mentioned kind of with a laugh, there's always old guys that the Braves have ties to that are available. Kirby Yates, Kenley Jansen, Chris Martin, like all these former Braves that are available on the market for 1-year deals. And
Will
then Will Smith. David Roberts is not a former Brave, but he's like an old guy, like very Alex Core, like 1 year, 10 million reliever who's been awesome for a long time. Like they could go that route. Or if you go somewhere like Estevez, is a little bit, probably more than a 1-year deal if I had to guess. And then like a little bit more of a investment versus like a plug the hole kind of thing. So maybe they do both. Alex could just pay everybody. I don't know. What's he going to do?
Yeah, I don't see any planet where Estevez only gets a 1-year, $9 million contract. I think that's...
At least not right now. I feel if he signed that, it would have to be like in March with just no market. And he's like, all right, I'll take your 1-year deal because that's all I have. But yeah, I'd be surprised too if he only got 1 year just because of the rest of the market and where it's going. But hey, Scott's still out there too. So maybe the relief market's the one area where guys are not going to get paid.
And Jeff Hoffman's out there too. So there's
I mean, he might be a starter though. He's the only thing about Hoffman. Like I don't know, we'll see. But perhaps this is the only market that's not going to get the windfall like everybody else seems to be getting this winter. All right, Stephen, do you want to get into the other topic on the show today? This is something I'm going to mostly leave it to you because this is your idea and it's a good one. Talk about the 40-man roster because the Braves have a 40-man roster like everybody else does. In the winter, because you don't know this, you cannot have guys on the 60-day IL, so you only can have 40. You can't have more than 40 with other machinations. You're just kind of limited to 40. And the Braves are full right now on the 40-man, which often leads, at least that I've seen, to people asking, like, wait, they're full on the 40-man already? Like, how can they make other moves when they're full on the 40-man? So all these questions we can answer along the way here. But your interest was piqued, basically, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, because they have kind of a lot of, not to be mean, they have a lot of clutter, a lot of, like, flotsam on the 40-man, it seems like. So take us there, Steve. What do you make of the situation where the Braves don't really have, like, I mean, obviously they have their core guys, but if you look at the 40-man, I think if an average fan pulled up the 40-man right now, they would be surprised how many guys they have no idea about and like have no relationship to and just a bunch of names on a page.
Yeah. So the 40-man obviously is the roster that if you want a guy on your active roster, then he first has to be put on the 40-man. And then from the 40-man, he can be put on the 26-man. So nobody can play for you unless they're on the 40-man roster. And the Braves right now have 40 guys, which is not uncommon. But what's unusual about the Braves at the moment is that they have a number of fringe roster players. And by fringe, I mean not guaranteed. If we started the season today, they would not be guaranteed a spot. These are not the Acuñas and the Sales of the world. These are the Nick Allens and the Eli Whites and the, Ian Andersons of the world who are not guaranteed spots. And the Braves have an unusually high number of those guys who don't have any minor league options. And the key to that, and it's kind of the Griffin Canning problem that we ran into earlier in the offseason, we talked about a lot on this podcast, is if you aren't guaranteed a spot on the roster, if you're a fringe roster guy and you don't have minor league options, it's very tough to keep somebody like that in your organization, at least a high volume of guys like that in your organization. And right now the Braves actually have a decently high volume of guys like that on their 40-man. And this was it reminds me a lot of last year, honestly, where the Braves did a full like purge of their 40-man roster. People remember the Aaron Bummer trade last year where the Braves just sent like 4 guys who were on their 40 who didn't have spots, maybe out of options, and they just wanted to clear their 40-man. And so they sent 4 guys to the White Sox, got Bummer back. If you look at the roster right now, it reminds me of that situation where, to the point where I would not be surprised at some point between now and the beginning of spring training if we saw another trade like that, where the Braves clear 3 or 4 spots at once to get one piece back. And it's always easier to do that with bullpen. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if they did it with a bullpen piece. But yeah, anytime you look down and you see such a high number of guys, it's like, here, let me double check. I think it's like 7 guys on the roster. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, 7 guys right now that are fringe, aren't guaranteed spots on the 26-man active roster, and don't have any minor league options. And then on top of that, on top of guys who don't have minor league options, the Braves have 2 guys who they took in the Rule 5 draft. They have Christian Cairo and they have Anderson Pilar, who they took in the Rule 5 draft. And for people who don't know, the rule for the Rule 5 draft is you have to keep those players on your 26-man roster, or if you want to take them off, you have to expose them to waivers or offer them back to their original team at half price. Which effectively means you can't option them, which is all that really matters in this conversation. The Braves just have a high number of guys on their 40-man roster who they can't currently option to the minors to do kind of the Gwinnett Atlanta shuttle that we see so much every year. And that's unusual. And I think at some point we're going to get to the point where they're either going to have to make a trade like the Aaron Bummer trade, or to have some of these guys get DFA'd for bigger signings, which is almost certainly going to happen anyways. But it is an unusually high number of guys who don't have any minor league options, who aren't guaranteed spots, and who are on the 40-man roster. And all of those combined is unusual.
Yeah, and the Bummer trade was one of those deals that the reaction was mixed, is the nice word I'll say, because people didn't understand it. And the difference I would say between that and what it is now is, for the non-diehards, like the diehards are sickos like us, they're looking at stuff all the time. But the Bummer trade was people that fans recognized. It was Michael Soroka, it was Nicky Lopez, it was Braden Shoemake, a former top pick, even Jared Schuster had like been around, right? The guys that are on the 40-man now, fans don't know. I mean, I don't think they know, unless the non-sicko fans. I'm just going to say a bunch of names right now, Steve, with no, just for reference here. So these are the guys with no options. The group that Steven just teed up. Nick Allen. Eli White was been on the roster for a while, so people know who that is, but no options there. Luke Williams, same thing. Eli White and Luke Williams are like prototypical utility guys. No options, though. It's hard to not have those guys with no options. Then you get to you mentioned the Rule 5 guys. You got Angel Perdomo, who's been hurt for a year plus. No options. Like, if he's healthy, could be an interesting bullpen piece, but people don't know who that is, unless you're a sicko. They do know Ian Anderson, who is no options, which is interesting, though, because Ian, I think, is like he's the one guy of that crop of, back and rotation guys who has no options left. And if you're Ian Anderson, like, I don't think he should be guaranteed a rotation spot by any means. Like, he's going to be fighting for his life in spring training, one would imagine. And then the guys that do have options, but they're on the 40-man, people don't recognize either. Brian De La Cruz, who we did a funny episode about recently. Carlos D. Rodriguez, quadruple A position player. Connor Gillespie, Davis Daniel, who the Braves just acquired. Domingo Gonzalez. They have a bunch of names of guys who people just don't know. So does anybody like strike you? I guess maybe Ian's worth talking about for a second, because obviously long-time investment guy, had the injuries, pitched in the playoffs, top 5 pick, all those things. But like, it is an interesting thing people probably aren't thinking about. Like, Ian Anderson is not in the ability to just like ship him off to Gwinnett anymore. We've passed that point. So you could trade him. I think he might have some value in a trade to someone that's like a lower end team that just looking for depth. Or maybe you just give him one more chance as the 5th starter. Obviously, we don't know if the Braves are going to add somebody else in the meantime. But I found that, as we were talking about this episode, something to circle. Like, hey, just to put this on the radar, guys. Like, Ian's not in the Winans, Dodd, Elder, Smith-Shaver group where they can just like show them to Gwinnett. It's decision time on Ian Anderson, basically.
Yeah, I mean, what we're talking about with options is exponentially more important with pitchers
Oh yeah,
because pitchers are the ones that almost never do you go a
yeah,
full season with 5 starters. I mean,
right. Well, and yeah, you tend to option pitchers regularly. You tend to send guys to win it regularly and back and forth during the season
all the time.
With Ian, like, man, okay, I'll ask you this, Steven. What is the percentage chance that Ian Anderson is in the rotation all season long, which is the only way that he could be on the team without being exposed to waivers at some point, would be to be in the rotation, or I guess maybe in the bullpen, which he's never really done, all year long. Like, what's the chances of that happening? It seems very unlikely to me that would happen.
I'd put that at like less than 5% because he would have to pitch well enough to earn that spot. I mean,
right. In spring training, he'd have to go out and beat out several guys. Now, obviously, you can debate the quality of these pitchers, and this is not in any order, but he had to be better than Smith-Shawver in spring. He had to be better than, Waldrop's a little bit different. He's maybe a little bit further away. But also, if the Braves bring in another veteran starter, which I think everyone agrees, or at least projects that they're going to add a veteran starter of some renown. It might be a boring 5th starter guy, but someone else is coming. And then you figure that they're going to have Strider back at some point. Like, man, you're threading a real needle there. And yeah, maybe you DFA him and he ends up passing through and hanging around. But I think he might be interesting enough where like a team's going to claim him. So I'm not. Look, listeners probably know this. I'm not the most invested in Ian Anderson. I think my projection level on Ian is pretty low as far as like what I'm expecting from him to do in the majors moving forward compared to what I've seen from fans. But I mean, you just answered the question. Like, if you think he can't be in the rotation like opening day and stick there, it's a weird spot because you can't send him to the minors without saying, hey, everybody, we're sending him to the minors. DFA, come get him. It's weird.
Yeah, I mean, even if the Braves don't add a starter,
right,
the odds of him being up in Atlanta are very small. Like, I think there's a better chance Ian Anderson gets traded between now and spring training than I do. He's going to be a significant part of the rotation in 2025 because, I mean, it's the exact same thing as the Griffin Canning problem. Like, if you don't have options, you cannot be a part of the shuttle. And if you can't be a part of the shuttle, then you have to be good enough to hold a spot all year long.
Yep.
And the odds of that happening are just tiny. I mean, Ian Anderson, forget the injury stuff, just on the pitching side, he hasn't been good enough to be in the majors in 3-4 years. I mean, the odds of him being good enough to hold down a rotation spot for not only spring training, but for 6 months of a season are just tiny. They're tiny. And I don't think the Braves are counting on it. And I think he would absolutely be included in a trade if the Braves got anything of use in return, because you look at this whole 40, in its totality, they probably do need to clear a couple of these guys because it's just too many. And Ian Anderson would be at the top of the list.
Yeah, and I don't mean to center on him too much. It's just that he's the most relevant because he's the biggest name, but also because, he might have some value. And he is relatively young still. I think he is he's still 26. He'll be 27 in May. But you're right.
Former top 5 pick.
Yeah, I mean, but as a reminder, I think people know this for the most part. He hasn't pitched in the majors at all since 2022. So it's been a long time. This last year, he was healthy enough to I think he made 15 starts in the minors. He wasn't bad, but he wasn't like incredible by any means in Gwinnett as a 26-year-old. So, I think that, he's not going to bring you some massive return in trade. But yeah, if you're asking me what's more likely, he gets put in a trade as a filler, not like a zero in a trade, but as part of a trade, or he's in the rotation in April, I would say trade is more likely pretty easily.
And I think I'll say this, because the other guy on the pitching side is Perdomo.
Yep.
He's got a very good chance to be in the bullpen because he doesn't have when you're a bullpen piece, it actually sometimes works in your favor because you're more likely to get the spot than the guy who does
and stay there. Unless you get hurt or whatever. And by the way, for someone like Perdomo, maybe you earn a bullpen spot coming out of spring training. Maybe you're the 7th guy in the bullpen. If you get hurt or you just don't pitch well, they'll just DFA you, and that's the end of that. It's very clear. And Perdomo, they don't have a relationship with. I mean, people probably don't even know who he is. He's 30 years old, by the way. But he didn't pitch last year at all. He was good actually in the majors with the Pirates, and I think was it 2023? Yeah, he was pretty good in the major, which is why the Braves probably have interest in him. He's got
He was hurt all last year.
Yeah, hurt all last year. The Braves, by the way, brought him in while he was hurt. Like they knew he was hurt. They brought him in. It was a project for 2025, basically.
Right.
And so the relationship to the fan base is not there with him and Ian. But you're right. It's so much cleaner and so much more likely that he's in the bullpen opening day than it is that Ian would be in the rotation. And they are the two guys of the pitchers that we're talking about here who are truly out of options. Then you have the Rule 5 you mentioned before, and Anderson Pilar, but there's two guys out of options as pitchers. The position players, it's like they're all kind of the same. They're not the same, but you know what I mean? It's the trio of Nick Allen, Eli White, and Luke Williams, any of whom could be player 26 on the roster in April. But they can't all be there. Like one of them, I mean, maybe two of them, but I would say probably only one of them on the roster to open the season. I don't have a prediction as to who that's going to be, Steve. Maybe you do. Go ahead and weigh on if you want. But just saying, like that means they're probably going to move on either via DFA or trade from at least one of these three, if not two.
It just comes down to like, do they add in the outfield? Do they add to shortstop? Because if like let's say they add to shortstop, well, that pushes, that pushes Orlando Arcia to a bench role, which pushes somebody else off of a bench role, like a Nick Allen.
Like I said, Nick Allen only has one role, and it's backup middle infielder. So
and Christian Cairo has to be on the roster, or he doesn't have to be, but he has to be on the roster, or he has to be opened up to waivers because he was a Rule 5 pick. So, that probably doesn't help Nick Allen's. You could, and again, it's same thing with the outfield. Like, do they add like Brian De La Cruz?
Yep.
He's actually a major league player. He's played in the majors for a long time now, but he's on a split contract. He's on a non-guaranteed contract. But if they don't add another outfielder, then you feel pretty good about the chances of Brian De La Cruz being on the roster, especially since Acuna is not going to be there opening day. But if they add another outfielder, it all opens back up again, and he might be at risk of being DFA'd as well. So a lot of it's, for the position players, it's not nearly as important because, they don't get shuttled like the pitchers do. But for these guys that don't have options, it can't be optioned like the Rule 5 guys. They're one signing away from being out of a job. And
if that even, I mean, that's the thing. Like even if they don't do anything else, which we think they're probably not going to do, they're not keeping all of Allen, White, and Williams. There's no chance. Yeah. And Nick Allen, I think we talked about it when the Braves acquired him. He has one of the worst hitting profiles I've ever seen,
ever,
for a major leaguer, and that's unfortunate. But look, he's a perfectly harmless backup middle infielder. But if they don't need that guy, if that's Orlando, for instance, instead, like he has no role in Atlanta. And maybe also on these guys, it's easier to DFA them and have them maybe end up going in Gwinnett. That's happened before with I think multiple of these guys. Like they end up just going back to Gwinnett because nobody wants them, nobody claims them. So anyway, that's the long and short of it. Like you got Rodriguez has options too. And look, some of these guys, the guys that have options, they just spend the year in AAA a lot of the time. Like it's pretty. Right. It's pretty cut and dry, but the 40-man also can get full. I mean, it's full right now. There are, I think probably maybe the last thing we'll talk about briefly here. Space opens up when you get to spring training because then you can go ahead and put guys on the 60-day again. We know of one player already. Joe Jimenez is going to be on the 60-day IL as soon as he's allowed to be. So that's one spot. And then other injured players or whatever. So like, there's more roster flexibility once you get into like mid to late February than there is right now. And look, if the Braves want to sign someone today to a contract, they won't have any trouble creating a 40-man spot. I've seen that like consternation. I don't know if people are trolling or what, but it's like, well, the 40-man's full. I'm like, and they will figure out a way to not have that be a impediment to signing someone. I promise you.
It's one click of a button, and all of a sudden the 40-man is not full anymore. Like it's very easy to clear. I mean, that's the one good thing about having so much kind of fodder, so many fringe roster players is that you're not short. You're not lacking any number of guys who can be cut if you want to add a major league piece. And listen, I know there's a lot of angst, and I know every day it grows. Yep. And I know every single day people get madder. I still am firmly, I've tried to say this from the beginning, I am still firmly in the camp. I think they're going to spend money. I think they're going to add. I'm stunned that they haven't done anything in terms of a major addition as we sit here on January 2nd. Like I'm I'm genuinely stunned that nothing has happened, but I think they're going to add. And when they do add, they will have to cut guys off the 40. You can only have 40 guys until the 60-day opens back up in the middle of February. So they'll have to cut guys, and these guys, a bunch of these guys will never see the light of day. Maybe not even see spring training for the Braves. But teams just add guys when they like something and they have a spot, they add guys knowing that if they add somebody better, they can cut them later. It's there's no harm. So
it's very low risk. That's actually a good point that we probably should have made. A lot of these, it's like very, very low risk. The Braves just like, all right, this guy's available on a split deal, or they can get him for, cash considerations or whatever from a team and like take one look at him, get to spring training. But you're right. Even before spring training, they might just be like, this is a guy we're holding on a roster unless someone better is available. Then you sign that player, cut this player, etc. Again, we made fun of it kind of with the Taylor Cruz pseudo emergency podcast. We were being funny about that. It wasn't actually an emergency podcast, but he's a good example. Like, it's a split contract. That won't stop them from doing anything else. It just won't. So anyway, go ahead.
I think I looked it up because I was actually wondering, because the Braves have like 3 or 4 guys on split contracts right now. And for anybody who cares, this is getting deep into roster stuff. But for anybody who cares, when guys sign a split contract, the guaranteed portion of that contract is only like $180K, which is what they make if they're in the minors.
Yep.
And so, I mean, $180K is like, it's a quarter of a minimum salary. It's a lot of money in real life, but in baseball, $180K is nothing. So,
right.
And there's a lot of people pissed off because that's all the money the Braves have spent so far this winter. And I get that, but at the very least, the risk is very low. Like Brad just said, it's effectively no risk in baseball terms.
Yeah, I'm going to talk through this a little bit. I knew this was coming up with Ian Anderson in particular, but I don't want to go back to that again. But like, I think he's someone that Braves fans should keep an eye on because they do have the relationship. I think, I'm sure you've seen this too, Stephen. I think I'm mostly responsible for monitoring our YouTube comments and things of the 4 of us. But like, there are a lot of people that still believe in Ian Anderson around the Braves.
It's almost a mirror of the Michael Soroka situation from last winter. He was coming into
it is pretty similar
with no options, been hurt, but had success in the past that people still dreamed on, and it ultimately got traded. And I'm just warning people now, especially people that are in love with Ian Anderson, do not be surprised if he suffers the same fate and isn't part of a trade, because that's what happens when you get to this point. You don't have minor league options, and you haven't locked down a spot on the roster.
Yeah, I mean, it's not even there's no animus here. It's just a simple math game at some point. Like, and especially if you don't think that, with Soroka, he kind of remade his career as a reliever. Now he's going to start again. Just that's cool. We're all rooting for Michael Soroka, by the way. We all have been the entire time. Great guy by all accounts.
The Nationals, right? He signed with the Nationals.
Yeah. And which was kind of surprised because like, hey, I thought
he got like 10. He got
real money. And maybe there's a path to Ian in a bullpen somewhere, but I don't know if that's what the Braves want to do with him. It's not an Ian Anderson episode. It just kind of became one for a minute there. But he's the most famous player that we talked about on this conversation to Braves fans, and I think he's maybe the most interesting because of just the logistics are involved there. But Nick Allen, Eli White, all these guys are.
And like Soroka, Anderson was drafted by the previous regime. Mm-hmm. So always keep that in mind. Who drafted who? You're not nearly as tied to guys you didn't draft.
Oh yeah, especially when again he hasn't pitched in the majors in a long time, like 2+ years of calendar time. And last year, like I know people were clamoring for him by the end of the season, but it is telling that he never even got to the majors last year when they were falling apart at times in the rotation. They had
and people also forget he got optioned, and then he got hurt. He got optioned because he was pitching so poorly.
Because he was bad. Yeah.
He didn't get. He hasn't been gone for 2 years because he's been hurt. I mean, he has been, but the reason he's not been on like the 60-day IL is because he was on the minor league roster when he got hurt, because that's how bad he was pitching.
Yeah. So that's, again, we'll keep an eye on Ian. I think he's the biggest name to monitor, but I won't list the names again. But there are, like we said, 5 or 6 guys with no options plus the Rule 5. So that's 7 or 8 guys that are either have to be on the roster or not, essentially.
Or
before
can't be on the roster. So
and if they get to the minors, it's because they pass through waivers in a DFA process. So, Steven, anything else you want to add on this conversation? It's kind of it's to be candid with everybody. It's kind of a plug episode. We're waiting for stuff to go on. I understand that. I think the Estevez thing was actually really interesting on some level that a name floated out there. We haven't talked about a lot, but the 40-man was something we were like going to talk about at some point, and it became the first show of 2025. But anything else you want to add, Stephen?
I would love to add something else. I would love to have something else to add.
Yes, agreed.
Our DMs, our daily DMs are hysterical at this point. But
I advertised that the other day. I was like, we'll never share the screenshots, but we're the four. And when I said the four of us, myself, Steven, Sean, and Scott are in a group chat, and we're enjoying ourselves as much as we can this time of year. So
yeah. No, just Happy New Year to everybody, of course.
Yes.
It was an awesome 2024. Obviously, we started the new version of this podcast in 2024. The response was unbelievable, has been unbelievable since we started. So a big shout out to you guys. We will keep going as long as we can. 2025 will be just like it. And here's to Alex giving us something to talk about in the next, it's got to be coming. It's got to be coming soon. It's got to be coming at some. We're running out of off season at some point. So.
We are. And Scott and I put the stake in the ground last week on the show. If you get to mid-February and they haven't done anything, we'll go nuclear. And I'm not sure if you heard this or not.
We will eviscerate them.
I volunteered you to do a solo screaming episode in mid-February. If you want to go ahead and put that in your calendar.
I've already written the script.
Perfect. If they don't do anything between now and then. All right. That's a podcast, everybody. Steven, where can folks find you social media wise?
Yeah.
They should be.
B_outliers is the X handle. Technically, I'm on Blue Sky as well. I think I've sent one post there in like 12 months. So
hey, you're on there though. It all counts.
I am on there. We have a podcast to spread around. So yeah, we try to get them all. But yeah, B_outliers is the X handle. That's where I am mostly, and then obviously Battery Power is where a bunch of us still write. So check us out over there. But we appreciate the support on Hammered Territory and the Foul Territory guys. It's been incredible.
Agreed. Please subscribe to this podcast. If you're just finding us for the first time, first of all, welcome aboard. Second of all, please stick around for us. Subscribe on Apple or Spotify, Amazon Music, anywhere you find your podcast. We're also on YouTube. If you're a YouTube watcher, thank you. Keep doing that. Also, please subscribe for us on audio too. Download there just to help out the podcast. But like the podcast as you're watching it, leave comments, etc. Follow Steven.
Oh, and condolences to all the UGA fans out there.
Yeah, we have a very mixed listenership on college sports. In fact, all four of us hosts have different allegiances, two of which are not Southeastern, two of which are, and I won't mention anything. Look, I wasn't even going to bring it up. I'm starting to bring it up right now.
Yeah,
you know what's going on.
You guys kicked our ass. Yeah, that was.
Yeah, so it's kind of. I didn't even think about it until right this second because I'm a Michigan person. Steven is an Alabama person, so that was ill-timed on our parts. But it's also a bowl game, a non-playoff bowl game in 2024. So like, I don't really get that invested in a non-playoff bowl game in 2024. But it was a fun one for me. I enjoyed it.
We're a basketball school now. So.
Yeah, Bama's a basketball school. That's fine. Georgia did a lot of things that they probably would want back tonight. As before, it was competitive. They didn't play terribly. They just made some mistakes. So anyway, college football is fun. But anyway, we'll have more on this podcast network soon enough. We have a plan. I won't say what it is in case it falls through. We have a plan for a show for Sunday. That'll be interesting if it comes through. So stay tuned for that. Please subscribe to the podcast. Tell your friends. Check out Fellow Territory. And we'll see you all next time. Happy New Year, everybody.